This poem is called The Ragged Wood, and it's by W.B. Yeats as well. This poem, on the surface, when you think of the ragged wood, it kind of implies something that's a little bit more ominous than what the poem is actually about. The ragged wood kind of implies something that's run down or maybe even a little bit scary, but it really ends up being a love poem. And on the surface, it seems like it's just a love poem, but really what it's commenting on is much deeper than that. But the very beginning is, "Oh, hurry where by water among the trees the delicate stepping stag and his lady sigh, when they have but looked upon their images, would none had loved, ever loved but you and I." So he's kind of painting this image, like the natural elements. It's very, indulgent, admiring, and he's saying, "Oh, hurry." It's kind of a sense of urgency. It's like, come see this. And the delicate stepping stag and his lady sigh. He's personifying these natural elements and demonstrating kind of like the glory of love and kind of glorifying this whole scene, really. And it's saying only when they gaze into each other's eyes, when they gaze upon each other and sigh, it's saying, but even that, image and that essence of love is still below what you and I have. So he's putting that above nature. The second stanza is another example of sort of two natural elements, and it says, "Or have you heard that sliding silver-shoed, pale silver proud queen woman of the sky, when the sun looked out of his golden hood, oh, that none ever loved but you and I?" And we decided that the sliding silver-shoed, pale silver proud queen woman of the sky was the moon, because that was the element that you would put in opposition to the sun looked out of his golden hood. And by making her, sliding silver-shoed, proud queen, it's an imagery,
It's royal.
royalty, majesty. And I don't know, like you said, it made it seem...
It was like glamorous, and I guess it kind of really glorifies the image of love. Whenever you're in love, you have like rose-colored glasses on, and everything's just so much better than it would be normally. So in looking at the moon, that is the silver proud queen, the woman of the sky, that his lover is totally greater than the moon, that is such a natural element of this world.
And I mean, he's putting this image of royalty below what he has with his love. So I mean, this is something it's celestial. It's the moon and the sun and the stars, and he's putting her above all of that. So obviously he sees her as up on the highest of pedestals. He couldn't be more in love with this woman. And we decided that the sun looked out of his golden hood. We thought a golden hood, that could imply a crown, which also goes back to the image of royalty and majesty. And so it's like, even, this is better than nature, it's better than royalty, it's better than the highest of orders. And then the third stanza we decided was where the fulcrum of the poem occurs, because he goes from giving these natural examples and setting their love above them to saying, "Oh, hurry to the ragged wood, for there I will drive all those lovers out and cry, oh, my share of the world, oh, yellow hair, no one has ever loved but you and I." And he's saying, "Oh, hurry," again, this urgency. It's like, come to the ragged wood. And Aaron brought out the interesting idea that the ragged wood was actually Yeats himself, he's saying, "Come to me," as if I'm flawed.
Yeah, like ragged wood, you wouldn't think, compared to all the images that were said before with how the woman is so great, and the ragged wood is now imperfect and nothing like royalty or majesty at all. And so we thought this was like the fulcrum, because the ragged wood was the first non-glorified image in the poem, and it conveys his urgency of action and of love, and he is the ragged wood himself, that he is imperfect.
And he feels, it almost implies that he feels lucky to have such a woman in his life, with him being such an imperfect human being, and then him putting these almost immeasurable amounts of praise and appreciation, and the tone is very impassioned and indulgent, and it's almost elaborate. It's very theatrical even. He says, "Oh, that none had ever loved but you and I," with an exclamation point, and he's, "Oh, hurry," and he's painting these really elaborate and detailed, scenes and images of nature, and he's calling out to her, like, "Oh, my share of the world," as in, you mean the world to me, "Oh, yellow hair." It's an apostrophe, though, because even though he's speaking directly to her, he's speaking to a presence that's absent. And the way that we know this is through Yeats's biographical information, this poem, in the time period in which it was written, was when he was using a woman named Maud Gonne, who we discussed in another video, as his inspiration. He called her his muse. She was his inspiration for all of his, almost all of his love poems, some of which, described the way his love was unreturned and some of them didn't. But he proposed to her some 4 times. He worshipped the ground that she walked on, and this is evidence of that in his poem. And he uses none that had ever loved but you and I, none had ever loved but you and I, and then he says no one has ever loved but you and I, with a period. And it's almost like a finality. He's his final declaration of his love for her, and no one has ever loved like the two of them have loved, or no one has ever loved but the two of them. And he's just, by saying no one, he's really separating, that idea and saying, this is how I feel and this is so true. And he's like you were saying, he's declaring his actions. He's showing her what he's willing to do. I will drive all these lovers out and cry, And when you think cry, you think of something that's very, overdone, kind of grandiose, like, oh, here, let me set forth this idea very enthusiastically. And he's very enthusiastic about her throughout the rest of the poem.
I guess like the whole poem in itself is like a fairy tale almost. With all the natural elements, it's almost Disney-like, and with the references to like the stag and his lady, and with the moon and the sun, and then the ragged wood is almost like a fulcrum in like a fairy tale, and it's the fulcrum in this poem. But it's so ironic because their love was anything but a fairy tale in real life, and it just shows his undying, unrequited love for her.
And it's like you're saying, it's almost like Beauty and the Beast or something, you would think, because, he puts her up on this pedestal and he sees her this way, but he doesn't see himself that way at all. He sees himself as imperfect, much like, the Beast. He pines for her and her love. So we decided that the meaning of the poem was his personal appeal to the woman of his dreams, who never really returned his kind of overabundant affection for her. But the overall message that he conveys about that is that his love in itself is dramatic, and love in general is dramatic, and it makes people in situations appear more glamorous than they may actually be. And the poem conveys his longing for a perfect love by illustrating like the ideal relationship in his mind, and he paints that image very, very well of how he sees it in his eyes, and how he wishes it would be. But obviously the reality is not that way, but he's saying that his love for her, he can even recognize that it's kind of blinded the fact that, it's not really that way. And, he would demonstrate the lengths that he would go to in order to protect that ideal love and to make her happy with him, even though she never truly was.